Welcome back and thank you for staying at KTN Prime. Now we dive into a conversation on the Finance Bill 2025 and the budget estimates for the financial year 2025 to 2026. My guests, as I had earlier mentioned, are here with me. We have Veronica Ndegwa, a senior research analyst at the Institute of Public Finance. Good evening and karibu sana. Anytime. And Alexander Rithi, who is the head of programs, the Institute for Social Accountability. Good evening and thank you so much for making time.
Good evening and thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. Veronica, I'll start with you. What stands out for you in this particular Finance Bill 2025?
Many things stand out, and I think relatively said everything in the Finance Bill is worth looking at. As usual, all the tax laws, income tax, value-added tax, excise duty, miscellaneous fees and levies have been amended through the Finance Act. But maybe departure from what we had last year, we have a heavy focus on administrative reforms. So that's why we are seeing delete that, replace this, redefine this, and also within the VAT Act, reclassification of some goods and services from being exempt to vatable and from zero rated to being exempt. I hope we'll be delving into that because that is one of the areas that I've seen people paying attention to.
Yeah.
There are a few good things in the Finance Bill. Under the Income Tax Act, I think the most highlighted proposal is the increase in the tax-free per diem amount from 2,000 to 10,000. And I think it's a good proposal, yes, but then the bigger question around PAYE has not been around the allowances people get, and especially because allowances are very rare within the private sector or anyone working outside government.
Okay.
So in terms of giving people more disposable income, we see a very limited impact because it's an occasional income, and so probably from our perspective, and I think from the discussions we've had, we had hoped to see a review of the PAYE tax bans that didn't come through. And the CS National Treasury yesterday, while addressing the Senate, said that because KRA has missed its revenue targets, then we are not going to review the PAYE tax bans. Under the VAT Act, I think the main reforms are within the reclassification I talked about, affecting some items that we think should have not been reclassified as vatable or exempt from being zero-rated. And this reclassification, probably from a government perspective, it's to address the problem of tax refunds as well as tax expenditures that come as a result of some of these incentives we give within the tax policy. But then again, the bigger question is looking at their broader impact on the cost of living and the cost of doing business.
Okay.
Tax procedures, we see again the refund question coming up. KRA, because they are the ones responsible for tax administration, they are saying they want now to take 120 days to process refunds instead of 90 days.
Yeah.
And of course, the contentious clause on data protection, access to business data and trade data for businesses. And that will get to us because we are clients somewhere. So if the business is required to share data, then it means even our financial information, if passed, then it will be assessed. So I think that is, in a nutshell, what the Finance Bill has.
All right.
Yes.
You talked about the Treasury CS talking about how KRA has missed the target. The bigger question is, when have they met the targets? But we'll canvass that a bit later. You talked about the per diem, increase in per diem amount. There was a Kenyan who was asking, how many Kenyans are actually affected by per diem? How many Kenyans really do get per diem for it to be a big deal for them? Alexander, maybe you can comment.
Yeah, that's a good question. And as much as it's a good thing for those who are earning per diem, the challenge we have is tax is supposed to be progressive, in the sense that the person who is earning the least amount of money gets to pay the least amount of tax. So the same should also apply when you are applying reliefs. The person who is earning the least should get the highest relief, because of course we are going to the same supermarkets, buying the same things. So the person who is earning this higher per diem should essentially not be the one who is getting this relief. But now what we are seeing, especially those of us who are in the private sector, very few people earn per diems at 10,000.
True.
So that basically you'll find it mostly in the public sector, and mostly those in private sector in higher levels of private sector. So essentially, by increasing it, you are giving preferential relief to those people who are already earning higher. So the whole principle of progressive taxation then is evaded, because now it seems like you're giving relief to the person who, quote unquote, doesn't deserve compared to the person who is earning less.
All right, I'm staying with you, Alexander. I mean, you were part of the Okwa Uchumi team that had a press briefing yesterday. And what I picked from that press briefing, of course, a lot was conversed, but you urged members of parliament to reject the Finance Bill 2025. Why?
That's a good question. Let me start by saying that there are many headlines that came out today about our media breakfast yesterday. And when I give a message, it is my message. How you pick it is up to you.
Okay.
So what we did is raise issues that we thought needed to be amended in the finance bill, and most of them Veronica has canvassed. But what was picked in some of the media houses was reject. We didn't say reject the finance bill at any point. What we said is reject some of these provisions that seem to be retrogressive.
Like?
Clause 52, which is bringing back, which is proposing to delete subsection 1B of section 59A of the Tax Procedures Act, which will expose all of us to KRA. Our data will of course, be available to KRA without getting a court order. And that violates Article 31 of the Constitution that gives us right to privacy. It also violates the entire of the Data Protection Act. So in our view, there's no need of passing a clause like that any layman would go to court and challenge the entire bill.
Okay.
We also provided caution on the massive movement of some items from zero-rated, especially to dealing with inputs on pharmaceutical products, inputs on livestock feeds. We provided caution. So then some of the media houses picked it right, others picked what they thought was sensational. So that is why I'm saying we didn't say reject the finance bill. We said reject some of those proposals that we think we can do better.
Okay, Veronica, coming to you, this issue of zero-rated, it seems like Kenyans have really picked up on it. Maybe before we even continue, break it down. What does it mean? What is zero-rated? And what does it mean going from zero-rated to now, is it exemption? Yeah, what does it mean?
Okay, under the VAT Act, we have the standard rate of 16%, where most of goods and services fall under. But then, because the government has a tax policy has a broader goal other than revenue, then there are some incentives that are given for the government to support the private sector and also to lower the cost of basic commodities, for example, maize flour in Kenya. So that's why in the VAT Act we have the first schedule looking at the first part of the first schedule of the VAT Act being exempt items, and I'll come to explain the difference now between exempt and being
zero-rated.
Zero-rated. Okay. So let's start with zero-rated, and let's use the bread example. And for simplicity, let's assume we are using just the flour to produce bread. So bread in Kenya is zero-rated. And assuming now the person who makes bread, a bakery that produces bread, now buys wheat flour, and pays VAT on that flour. That flour is an input in production of bread, which is zero-rated. So when they come to file their tax returns to KRA, on the final product, which is bread, they are not paying any VAT. But because it is zero-rated, they are then allowed to claim back the VAT they had paid on the input, which is maize flour. When it comes to exempt, so if bread was exempt, the producer of bread would not claim back the VAT they had paid in producing that bread. So the difference is because you're able to claim back the VAT you had paid, then your cost of production is lower, and so the price of bread will be lower. lower. So if you move an item from zero rated to exempt, the likelihood is that the price will go up because now there's an extra cost in terms of VAT on inputs. Then if you move an item from exempt to being vatable, it means now you're paying 16% VAT on bread, but also you're paying VAT on the inputs. So the price impact is highest when you're charging VAT at 16%, but even moving an item from being zero rated to being exempt, there will be an increase in the price of that item.
So we are likely to see the price of bread going up.
The bread example was to explain the difference.
Yes,
but
in that example.
Let me pick the example that Alex had given of pharmaceutical products, or a simpler example of inputs used in production of animal feeds. So the manufacturers of animal feeds now will be paying VAT on the inputs they use to produce animal feeds. So it means they're incurring an extra cost in terms of the cost of inputs. So the cost of animal feeds is likely to go up. But it does not end there, because now animal feeds becomes an input in production of milk. So the farmer who was able to afford good animal feeds, or the processed animal feeds, not the normal napier grass and all that, then they'll not be able to afford as much they were affording before.
Yeah.
So meaning probably their cost of production will definitely go up. But then even looking more broadly, the first impact will be now a rise in milk prices. But because now I'm not able to afford as much feeds as I could before, then I'm not able to produce as much milk as I was producing before. When demand goes high, where supply goes low and the demand is still high, then there's still an increase in price. This farmer has employed someone. So if the milk yields are going down because I cannot afford feeds, I either lower your salaries or I employ lesser employees. So again, someone who had an income and was able to afford to buy food for his family, the income has come down. And so the impact is beyond the animal feeds prices. It has a broader economic impact. So even when we were analyzing the finance bill, we tried in our submissions to the National Assembly, we tried to highlight some of these impacts. And the animal feeds is just one example, but you have other goods like pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
As Alex said, now the production of medicine will go up. Then patients probably will struggle now with higher bills. And we know the moment you're hit by a big health bill, sometimes you're pushed back to poverty. So the finance bill, in our view, shouldn't be viewed in isolation, like what has been the practice. So like we have to view it as part of the broader PFM system, so that we're able to map out all the impacts, even on the cost of living, the cost of doing business, and in addition to now the whole conversation around service delivery.
Okay,
Yes.
Since we've started the issue of agriculture, maybe let's talk about that, because the Kenya National Farmers Federation equally raised a red flag on the Finance Bill 2025, saying that it could increase agricultural input costs by up to 15%. This threatens food security in general and the stability of the sector, if you look at it from a wider perspective, as Veronica has said. From where you sit, do you really think the government is listening to Kenyans, or are they sort of aloof to the problems that we have or we are facing? Alexander?
In our view, when we analyze this finance bill, it was meant to deal with tax administration issues mainly. And one of the key focuses that was provided for in the tax policy, national tax policy, was to reduce on what we call tax expenditure. And this tax expenditure is what Veronica has explained. You get a chance to recover your input VAT. But what we are seeing, the impacts of now the proposals that have come in there are the ones that are going to be dire. Because initially we had, like the animal feeds we are talking about, or the pharmaceutical products we are talking about. It was possible for the manufacturers to recover part of their cost of production through the input VAT. Now that is going to be passed on to the consumer. As government is trying to reduce on these refunds, then we are going to burden somebody else, because somebody has to pay for that cost. And that person is going to be a patient who is suffering from diabetes and they require medication for a lifetime. This person is going to be a farmer, and eventually the person who is taking a cup of tea that has milk, or the person who is taking eggs for breakfast. So we must look at it from that angle, because once you do one thing on this end, it has an impact on the other hand.
Yeah.
And that is why you are seeing the sort of reaction that is coming from the farmers, because definitely there's somebody who is going to pay for that. And at the end of the day, it will be the consumer. Now, our view is, and we have made a similar submission to the Finance and Planning Committee of the National Assembly, we need to relook at some of these provisions.
Okay.
Because yes, we are trying to achieve one thing, which is reduce tax expenditure. And the argument here is once you reduce tax expenditure, we have some resources that are used by government through KRA to refund private sector. And this money is supposed now to be made available to offer services back to the people. That would be a different discussion that we would have.
Okay.
But right now, we can't rectify one problem by creating another. Because when you listen to Treasury, they are telling you that we are not sure whether these reliefs we are providing to the manufacturers, whether they pass it on to the consumers. But in my view, we should do a thorough, and Treasury has all the instruments and KRA to do an analysis and find out if we are offering this relief through zero rating an item, is that relief being transferred to the final consumer? Instead of now bringing in another problem where you say we are having challenges with these refunds, it is eating into other resources that would have gone somewhere. But now you have created a bigger problem, and our concern is the very vulnerable in the society.
Yeah.
And in this case, they are going to be hurt, to be hit harder than everybody else. Some of us will still afford milk,
little you can, yeah.
regardless of where it goes, will still afford eggs. But look at a patient who is suffering from diabetes or hypertension or a heart problem, and they need medication for a lifetime. Already right now, medication, anybody who is dealing with such chronic illnesses, is already very high, the cost of the medication. Now, if you add what we are seeing now by moving the inputs from zero rated to exempt, and then we have another provision in the Excise Duty Act.
Yes, that was what I was coming to next. Yes.
That is now proposing to increase excise for packaging material from 25 to 35.
Yes.
I'm now focusing on the same product, the pharmaceutical product.
Yeah.
It is heat on the VAT side. Then you come and heat it again on the packaging side. All these costs are being transferred to the same patient. So when you look at it, then we are saying we are trying to rectify one problem by probably creating a bigger one. If you have more chronic patients not accessing medication as they have been accessing, then we are likely to see a rise in mortality. Or we see many families going into deeper poverty because of some of these provisions that we are bringing in.
Add on that, because if I'm not wrong, talk to us about the implication of introducing 25 to 35% excise duty. And if I'm not wrong, it's imported goods from outside is EAC, so East Africa Community. But then this means fuel, which already Kenyans are already complaining about. He's talked about the recall effect. Add on that.
I think under excess duty this time round, the changes were not very many, but what Alex highlighted is packaging materials. And I think what we know about the private sector, their core goal is profit making. So the moment the cost of production goes up, then that additional cost is transferred to the final consumer.
Okay.
So looking at the excise duty that you're talking about, the rates were increased for packaging materials. So anything that is wrapped in paper.
Oh, it's not just anything that is imported.
No.
Okay.
It's a specific good. So there is mostly packaging, paper used to make packaging materials. But looking at just broadly our supermarkets, it's virtually everything that has paper is wrapped in paper.
Okay.
So that is an additional cost to the manufacturer. And we as the final consumers bear that cost, because then a producer or someone who is in business, their goal is profit. So the moment cost goes high, they adjust the prices accordingly and transfer that to the final consumers here.
Okay, that's a really good place to take a short break. We'll be back with more.